Welcome to the LeadrPulse podcast, the podcast with actionable insights for leaders revolutionizing the world of work. For the last 3 episodes, you've gotten to hear Matt Tresidder, our co-founder and CEO, and Pat Lencioni, the founder of the Table Group, talk about this idea of public accountability and what is a true leader motivated by, and should you talk about politics in the workplace. In today's bonus episode, we're releasing the full raw interview between Pat and Matt. So let's take a listen to this incredible interview with Pat Lencioni.
Okay, so my question for you, under the umbrella of the motive, my question is, why is leaders being motivated by power a bad thing? Because there have been so many leaders over the world that have been motivated by power and have done good things. So why is it a bad thing to be motivated by power?
Yeah, and sometimes good things can come even from the wrong motivation. But a true leader is motivated by influence for the benefit of others. When you're motivated by power, and they say power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely, then your motivation from the very beginning, and it comes down to this. It's so interesting, Matt, because what it really is when you're motivated by that, you will reject the kind of work that you have to do that's in service of others if it doesn't enhance your power. So I like to say there's 2 motives for leading. There's serving others, and there's authority and power, if you will, involved in that, but that's not your motivation. And then there's self-service, if you will, or you're doing it for yourself, for the rewards that you get out of it, one of which is power or money or fame or freedom to do whatever you feel like doing. Well, a leader that's motivated by those things, the rewards, is going to look at some parts of his or her job and go, I don't want to do that.
Right.
I don't feel like doing that. That doesn't enhance my power. That doesn't make me more famous. That's not giving me money. But the leader who's motivated by serving others and exercising their authority or power for the good of others is going to lean into whatever's necessary to make the company, the customers, the world a better place. So the motive influences what you're willing to do.
And then what about the leaders that don't reflect that, but still seem to be mover and shakers? I think the classic example is like a Jack Welch, probably not motivated by servant leadership, but the guy got things done. The guy really was a mover and shaker for a decade or more.
It's interesting. And I didn't really meet Jack Welch. I met his wife, and but I think though, what's interesting about him, and by the way, people change in life.
Sure.
Like sometimes you slide into one or the other. I think initially he was motivated by getting things done through other people, but that getting things done was to serve customers and to make a difference. I think early on, because I think the way they went about things. Now, I do think though that even if you've got any fissures in that motivation, and if you do get caught up in the power, and many leaders who once had good intentions, once they achieve a modicum or 2 of success, might go, hey, it's time for me to start taking care of myself. And then that's why I think so many leaders, political leaders, maybe they ran for office in their early days for a certain reason, but they get corrupted. And we all have to be aware of that. I've slid into that in my career where we started to be successful, and I started coming to work thinking, I kind of just want to do what I feel like doing. That was serving me, not our customers, not our company. And I had to kind of catch myself and go, no. I have to preserve the purity of my intentions and my motive, which is it's about our customers and my employees. And that's how we're going to make the world better. Now, the Silicon Valley is full of all these famous CEOs that I think are very driven by their own motives, by rewards. I think many of them are dangerous. And for every device that comes out or good thing that happens, there's so much damage being done. And so I think it's important that we not just look at the most visible outcome and realize that there's a trail of destruction behind them that can't be ignored.
Right. Okay. And then I believe, and I want this to be true, but I believe most leaders don't wake up in the day and think, I want to be a terrible leader today. I think most people do wake up with the right motives. So they might be blind spots. They might not know they have them. Do you have any advice to someone on how to not slip into some of those? Because I think you're right. It's a gradual thing over time, but how do you not slip into that?
Well, and I will say this, and knowing what I know about Leadr, most of the people that are buying your stuff get it.
Mm.
If they're partnering with you, you're probably right. They have the right motives. And then you just have to check your intentions. And you're like, for me, it's prayer and being in touch with the people and having empathy for the people around me, my customers, my employees. But I would not agree with you. I think that many leaders actually are raised to make it about themselves. And the most dangerous ones are the ones that pretend it's not, but deep down inside they are.
Okay.
And that's not, I don't mean that in a cynical way. I just think we raise people today to say, what are you going to get out of this? What are you going to do? And the question is really, the most successful CEOs are not famous.
Right.
And there's even companies that are famous that like I could ask you right now and you go, yeah, I don't even know what the CEO looks like.
Right.
And then there's these other tech companies or media companies where the CEO loves being in the spotlight. And so I would say just constantly purify your intentions and don't let yourself start to look at it as a reward. A leader should be a burden. It should be a burden to be a leader, a burden that you take on and you're glad to do.
One of the things that you've taught that has helped my leadership the most is this idea of accountability should happen in a public setting, peer accountability with everybody in the room. And the things when I've changed the most and when someone's checked my motives the most and I've had to adjust my leadership the most is not when someone's pulled me aside and had a one-to-one conversation. It's when it's called out in a healthy way in the room. Do you want to talk about that? Because I think it's quite a hot take. Most of the time people would say, practice it in private, do those conversations confidentially and don't embarrass your colleagues. But I think you would say that's wrong, yeah?
Yes, I think in most situations, if you have a team where there's some trust, good trust, and it's a good team. In other words, you're not suspecting that 2 or 3 of your executive team members should be fired. You should be let go. But it's like, no, I like my team. Everybody's got their flaws, but this is a good team. Calling them out on their issues in front of their teammates with respect, but with clarity and directness is good for 2 reasons. First of all, and maybe 3 reasons. First of all, everybody in the room hears what you had to say. And so they now are like, oh, if he told Fred not to do that, then I probably shouldn't do that either. Good to know. The other one is the people in the room are now going, oh, he holds people accountable. I don't have to wonder about that or go ask him, hey, are you going to tell Mary or Fred that they need to do this differently? It's like, oh, I just heard them do it.
Right.
Third, it creates kind of a culture where it says, this is what we do with one another. It's a sign that we trust each other and care enough. Now, the time where it's not appropriate is when you are really questioning that person's fitness on the team. And so this is becoming now sensitive, really a corrective action, if you will. That then might very well violate the dignity of that person. And sometimes then it's better to pull them aside after the meeting and go, I need to tell you, this is very serious. You need to change this. And I'm wondering if this is going to work, if you don't. Even when you do it that way, though, you have to loop in the rest of the people on the team and say, just so you guys know, I've talked to Fred. And I'm working on that, and I don't want you to think I'm ignoring it.
Right.
See, the problem is when we do everything offline, one-on-one, it leaves everybody else wondering, well, can I act that way? Is anybody going to hold Fred accountable? Is the CEO? And then you're like, well, I'm being nice to Fred. Well, what you're doing is you're creating a bunch of problems on the team.
There you go. And they're wondering, maybe it was worse than it really happened. Because when I've seen you model this, you came on site with our executive team and you were helping us navigate conflict and you made it not weird. I'm sure you've done this in other rooms, but the time you did it with me was, hey, Matt, you're doing that thing again. That thing where you kind of over talk and over galvanize the room. We get it. You don't have to keep talking. I was like, that wasn't rude. And I don't know if you remember that. It wasn't rude and obnoxious, but I think people build it out. It's like, oh, I don't want to hurt Matt's feelings. I don't want to come out and say it.
Well, what's interesting is I kind of don't remember it, but I do remember it a little bit, but it wasn't like a major thing because I'm kind of used to doing that.
Yeah.
But you know what the key is? There's 2 keys to doing that. Because a lot of CEOs are like, oh, I'd like to do that. But the key to doing that is first leading with yourself. In other words, being able to say, I know what I do. I do this and I do this, and people tell me I shouldn't. And so you guys got to know that you can call me on it because I'm not perfect. Yeah. Then when you do it for somebody else, nobody thinks you're like trying to condescend or put them down. You're like, oh, he would do it too. Right. The other thing is, if you have some tool that explains why that person acts that way. And like, whether it's like the Working Genius or the Myers-Briggs, you can go, oh, I know that you have a tendency to do that because that's how God wired you. And that's okay. That's probably just not appropriate. Now, it's not saying you should change who you are, man. You're flawed. It's saying, hey, I don't think this is the best time to do that. And I
Yeah,
realize it comes naturally to you. So maybe we need to kind of moderate that.
I love it. Okay, we got 5 minutes left. Anything else on the motive? Otherwise, I've got another hot take I want to get from you. Anything else around the motive you want to encourage, inspire listeners around?
No, I just think to know that even great leaders slip. And so when you read it, I was so thrilled when leaders would call me and go, Pat, I had all 5 check marks against me. I was leading for the wrong reasons, and I really want to change. So they weren't afraid to say, yeah, I've slipped up a little bit, but I can do something about that. It's
Yes.
not about, are you permanently good or bad? It's, what am I doing today? And do I need to correct that?
So good. So good. I love the heart around you have to have EQ too. The realization that you have to check your motives at the door and actually confront them.
Right.
Okay.
And let other people check your motives too and say, why are you saying that?
That's good. I like that. Okay, I want to change gears and talk about something that you share that I think most people would disagree with, which is talking about politics in the workplace. So it's election year, and I've heard you talk about how don't shy away from transparent and honest and open conversation, and just engage and just dive into the conversation without being you don't want to create a divide, but you do want to engage in the conversation, not ignore it. So do you want to talk to me about why you believe strongly about conversations like that can and should happen in the workplace?
Yeah, and I think that I want to be clear though. I'm not saying you should encourage it, tee it up, formalize it. I'm just saying that people bring their full selves to the workplace, and if they feel like I'm not allowed to ever engage around something I feel strongly about, that only raises the temperature and the awkwardness in the office. And so what I'm saying is, if a person has a feeling about something, we should say, hey, listen, everybody's feelings are valid. As long as you're not violating a core value, because that's the limits of diversity. It's like our core values we have in common. You can share that. You do it with respect, and you listen to people, and you don't judge them. You don't berate them. Then you're kind of like letting the air out of that balloon slowly so it doesn't pop. But what happens is companies most of the time just say, we're not going to go there. And then finally somebody just explodes.
Right.
And so the message is really letting people be fully human. Now, if somebody comes to work every day and they're venting about a candidate, that's appropriate to go, hey, we are here to work and get stuff done. And I know you can pursue those things on your own time. It's fine to share your opinions with people, especially with people you know and trust well. But having big public conversations about politics in the office that's disruptive, no, that's over the line.
Such a good distinction. And do you have any encouragement to the executive that's knowing that there's a pretty volatile election coming this year, knowing that there is going to be disagreement under the surface in the office? Do you have any encouragement on maybe how to front foot that, if at all?
You know what I would say? I would say, because this is the most divided society has been in my lifetime, our country. And frankly, I think there are forces driving that want that. And I think if I were a leader, I'd probably say, hey, everybody, I know we're all know what's going on in the election, and we're going to eventually vote, and you're going to hear all kinds of things. You're going to have emotion around it. That's normal. That's good. You care. I don't want anybody here to think that it would be impossible for somebody to really want one of the candidates to win. If you come in here and think, oh, that is so, I can't believe you would want that. Believe it, know it. Every viewpoint is valid to a certain extent. And if you come in here and are like, well, that's just ridiculous that you would think that. I had my brother recently tell me that I had to tell him I would never vote for one of the candidates. And I was like, first of all, it's not your place to tell me that. And secondly, there's reasons why somebody might vote. And I think if everybody goes into it saying, hey, everybody's got their own opinions and they can validate those opinions. And so respect that. But the problem is a lot of people are like, oh no, I think that's terrible that you would think that. And those kind of people you don't want in your company.
Right.
A person who can't empathize with another person is somebody who there's something there's a wound there or a lack of understanding there. So I think it's like nobody here should tell somebody else that their opinion
I
is
love
already
that.
right.
One things I've heard you share really passionately about was some people in Silicon Valley feeling ostracized and feeling like they can't speak up for their political viewpoint or even their religious viewpoint, and they kind of keep to themselves because they don't want to be quote unquote canceled. Do you have anything to say to that leader that's that's not bringing their full selves to work because they know if they do, they'll be ostracized or kind of cast out from their team?
Well, what I would say is two things. One, find a place to work, ideally, that actually respects you as a human being, that
Love it.
says, if you go to church here and you believe this and you believe this about life, as long as you can tolerate people who have different views, you should be able to go to work and be yourself and express yourself. The Silicon Valley, a place that often thinks it's the most tolerant, is actually in many cases the most intolerant. And when I talk to people there, they're like, oh, we want people to be open-minded about everything. We want diversity as long as they don't think differently than I do, which is like, I think the most fundamental violation of diversity.
Right.
So what we say is, if you really want a diverse, tolerant environment, then tolerate and welcome diversity of thought and opinion and faith too.
Right.
So if you really want to be diverse, be open to everyone. And if you work in a company that won't allow you to do that, but I would say, be the hero that kindly goes to the leadership and say, hey, you guys, you know something? I don't feel like I'm welcome here. And maybe you can affect change so that other people will feel welcome too. And if they say, yeah, actually, we're not welcoming of that, then I think you need to say, then don't pretend you're a diverse company. In fact, you're not diverse. And I want to work someplace that is truly diverse.
Yeah.
Now, that doesn't mean some small companies or some companies can't say, no, we actually do make one of our core values a belief in this. Just be upfront about it so people can opt out or opt in based on that.
Do you think a CEO listening to this of a small, medium-sized business has a duty to voice that? Because I think a lot of the things that you're saying are probably subconsciously understood, but maybe they haven't actually come out and been verbal and being that obtuse and clear to their staff on what you just described, that people shouldn't feel that way. So does the CEO, especially in a year like this, where it is so divided, do we have a responsibility to actually come out and be forthright with that? Is that something we should do?
Yes. And I think it's like this. Let's call it issue X. So it doesn't matter what it is, left, right, whatever. If issue X is so important to your small business or medium-sized business, and you believe it in your heart, I think it's important to come up to people and say, you know something, everybody, this is something we believe is important. And if you're not in support of issue X, you're probably not going to be comfortable here. And we don't want anybody to feel uncomfortable. So I just want to admit, I don't want to pretend like it doesn't matter, because it does. And let you know that if you're anti-issue X, then gosh, this might not be the place for you. That's actually an act of mercy and kindness, because you're being clear.
Yes.
But if you're like, hey, issue X is really important to a lot of people here, I get that. But we don't believe that it's a deal breaker at all. We think that we can have people that don't support issue X and people that do, and nobody should feel unwelcome because of that. Okay. That's also an act of mercy and kindness. What's wrong, and what happens too often, is when people secretly think issue X is the thing, but they say, oh, no, we're tolerant of everybody, but then they don't give promotions to, and they're snarky to, and they make public declarations for issue X, and people who don't support issue X are made to feel like they should just be quiet. Then they live in a ghetto. That is wrong. So have the courage to be upfront.
I love it. Okay, last thing on this topic, and then I've got one more thing before we wrap up because we're at time. I can hear the built-in excuse of someone saying, well, we haven't defined our values. Because one of the things you said earlier was point back to the values. But what I can hear someone saying, well, we haven't actually defined that before. We didn't communicate any of that in the onboarding class. So it's probably too late. So I'm just going to let it simmer and let it lie. Is that a good excuse or no?
No, it's always a great time to clarify things.
Okay.
And whether you have old values that are generic, and there's a lot of companies out there that go, gosh, we've had these for years, but it's like, be nice, be friendly, smile a lot. And it's like, that's not core values.
Yeah.
Or you've never done it. It's a great time to stop and say, let's actually clarify, because what you're doing is you're providing the boundaries. It's like if you're bowling a little kid and you put the little guardrails up, you're saying, we don't want to drift into the gutter.
Yeah.
And so let's actually clarify, what are the must-haves that if a person doesn't share that behavioral value, it would be better for them to work someplace else. And it usually comes down to 2 or 3 behavioral adjectives or behavioral things. And then it's okay to say, and if you don't have those, you might be a wonderful person, but it would be better if you were a wonderful person in an organization that valued that.
Totally. I love that. It's never too late to articulate it. You can always clarify. Chief reminding officer, right?
Exactly. And you know, you can actually with dignity and respect move somebody out of an organization because they're not a fit,
Yes.
and make them not feel rejected as a person, but make them realize I'm trying to help you find the right fit for you.
And it might be the best thing for them. As uncomfortable as that is, it might be the absolute best thing for them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Love that.
But thanks for listening to the LeadrPulse podcast. Hope you enjoyed today's episode with Patrick Lencioni, Matt Tresidder, and myself as we unpacked this idea of should you talk about politics in the workplace. I don't know about you, but I walked away with some actionable insights around really driving clarity around our mission and our values. We'd love for you to check out the Leader Advantage, which is our platform in partnership with Pat and the Table Group. You can check it out at leadr.com/table-group. That's leadr.com/table-group. You can also just go to our homepage and talk to our team, learn more. There at the top header, it says the Leader Advantage. You can check it out right there. Well, thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time on the LeadrPulse podcast.